Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Hare Krishna. We're reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 2, Chapter 7, entitled Scheduled Incarnations with Specific Functions. We're reading text 43 to 45. It's October 23rd, 2020. It's Canto 2, Chapter 7, text 45. Narayanam namaskritya naram shabhinottamam devim saraswatim vyasam tato jayamudiraya. Before reciting the Srimad Bhagavatam, which is the very means of conquest, one should first offer respectful obeisances unto the personality of Godhead Narayan, to Narayan Rishi, the supermost human being, to Mother Saraswati, the goddess of learning, and to Srila Vyasadeva, the author. Nasta praise for Bhadrishya Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya, Bhagavat Utamashloki Bhakti Bhavati Naishtiki, by regular attendance in classes on the Srimad Bhagavatam, and by serving the pure devotee representative of Srimad Bhagavatam, loving devotional service unto the personality of Godhead, who is praised by transcendental songs, is irrevocably established in the heart. Okay. Veda Aham Anga Paramasya Hi Yogamayam Yuyam Bhava Cha Bhagavan Atha Daityavarya Patni Mano Sa Cha Manu Cha Tat Patmaja Cha Vibhu. Oh, I forgot one. Prachina Barhi Vibhu Anga Uta Dhruva Cha Iksvaku Aila Muchukunda Videha Gadhi Raghu Ambarisha Sagara Gaya Nahusha Aja Mandatri Alarka Shatadanu Anu Ranti Deva Devavrata Bali Amutaraya Dilipa Sabhari Utanka Shibi Devala Pipalada Sarasvata Udhava Parashara Purvishena Ye Anye Vibhishana Hanumat Upendradat Partha Arshtisena Tidora Shrutade Varya Veda Hamanga Paramasya Hi Yogamayam Yuyam Brahmascha Bhagavan Atadaitya Varya
Yam Bhavasya Bhagavan Atadantya Varnam
Patni Mano Sachamanushchatad Atmajashcha
Agni Mano Sachamanuscha
Prachina Barhir Ribur Anga Utta Druvashtra
Rachimban Aga Uta Brahmascha
Ikshvakur Aila Muchukunda Videha Gadhi Ragvambarisha Sagara Gaya Na Ushadya Mandatrilalaka Shatan Banuranti Deva Deva Vrato Balir Amu Vitarayo Dilipa Sabar Yutanka Shibi Deva Pipalada Sarasvato Dava Parashara Burishena Yene Vibhishana Hanumad Upendra Datta Partashtite Sena Vidura Shuta Deva Varya If someone would like to chant, you can chant one of the verses.
Vedaham anga paramasya hi yoga maya.
Vedaham anga paramasya hi yoga maya.
Yuyam bhavascha bhagavan atadaitya varya.
Yuyam bhavascha bhagavan atadaitya varya.
Atmi mano sacha manushcha tad atmajascha.
Patni Mano Sacha Manushcha Tad Atmajascha
Prochi nibare aburanga utadruvashta.
Prachina Barhiri Buranga Utajuvascha. Would someone online like to chant the second verse of the three?
Ikshvakuraila Muchukunda Videha Gadi
Ishvakuraila
Kunda Videha Gadi
Ragvam Bharisha Sagaragayanahu Shadya Mandhatralarka Satadanva Nuranti Deva Deva Vrato Baliramurta Rayo Dilipa
Deva Vrato Dilipa
Savar-yutanka Shivideva Lapi Palada
Savar-yutanka
Shivideva Lapi Palada
Sarasvato Dava Parashara Burishena
Sarasvato Dava Parashara Burishena
Yenye Vishana Hanumadu Pendradata
Yenye Vidishana Hanumadu Pendradata
Partashti-shena Vidura Shuta Deva Varya
Partashti-shena Vidura Shuta Deva Varya
Vedahamanga Paramasya Yogamayam
Vedahamanga Paramasya Yogamayam
Yuyam Bhavascha Bhagavam Matatai Chabayam
Yuyam Bhavasya Bhagavan Atadaityavaya
Patni Manusa Chamanuscha Tad Atmachascha
Padni Manosa Chamanusya Taradmajasya
Asina Bhagiri Bulonga Utadubascha
Prachina Bhari Vibhuranga Utadruvasya.
Would anyone else like to chant one of the verses?
Ikshva Kuraila Muchukunda Videhagati
Gadhi
Ragvam Barisha Sangaragayana Hushatya
Ragvambarisha Sagaragayana Hushatya
Mandatralarka Shatatanvanuranti Deva
Mandatralarka Shatatan Vanuranti Deva
Deva Vrato Baliramurtarayo Dilipa
Deva Vrato Baliramu Vitayo Dilipa
Zohar Yutanka Sivi Deva Lepipalada
Sambayutanka Deva Pipalada
Sarashvatoda Avaparasara Burishena
Sarasvato Dava Parashara Burishena
Yenye Vibhishana Hanumad Upindra Datta
Yene Vibhishana Hanumadupendra Datta
Partha Rishite Sena Vidura Shruta Deva Varya
Partashitena Vidura Shruta Deva Varya Veda, know it. Aham, myself. Anga, O Narada. Paramasya, of the Supreme. He, certainly. Yoga Mayam, potency. Yuyam, yourself. Bhava, Shiva. Cha, and Bhagavan, the great demigod. Atta, as also. Daityavarya, Prahlad Maharaj, the great devotee of the Lord, born in the family of an atheist. Patni, Shatarupa, Mano, of Manu. Sa, he, cha, also. Manu, Svayambhuva, cha, and. Tat Atmaja cha, and his children like Priyavrata, Uttanapad, Devahuti, etc.
And his children like Priyavrata, Uttanapad, Devahuti, etc.
Prachina Barhi, Ribu, Anga, Uta, even. Dhruva, Cha, and. Ikshvaku, Aila, Muchukunda, Videha, Maharaj Janaka, Gadhi, Raghu, Ambarish, Sagara,
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 Gaya,
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 Nahusha,
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 Aja,
Aja,
and so on.
and so on.
Mandatri,
Mandatri,
Mandata,
Mandata,
Alarka,
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 Shatadanu,
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 Anu,
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 Rantideva,
Antideva,
Rantideva,
Antideva,
Devavrata,
Devavrata,
Bhishma,
Vishma,
Bali,
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 Bali, Bali,
Amuritaya,
Amuritaya,
Amuritaraya,
Amuritaya,
Dilipa,
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 Sobhari,
Sobari,
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 Utanka,
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 Shibi,
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 Devala,
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 Pipalada,
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 Sarasvata,
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 Udava,
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 Parashara,
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 Urishena,
Burishena,
Urishena,
Burishena,
Yea,
Yea,
those who,
those who,
Anye,
Anye,
others,
others,
Vibhishan,
Vibhishan,
Vibhishana,
Vibhishan,
Hanumat,
Hanumat,
Hanuman,
Hanuman,
Upendradat,
Upendradat,
Shukadev Goswami,
Shudeva Goswami,
Partha,
Partha,
Arjuna,
Arjuna,
Arshtisena,
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 Vidura,
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 Shrutadev,
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 Varya,
Varya,
the foremost.
foremost.
Translation, this is Canto 2, Chapter 7, texts 43 to 45. O Narada, although the potencies of the Lord are unknowable and immeasurable, still, because we are all surrendered souls, we know how he acts through Yogamaya potencies. And similarly, the potencies of the Lord are also known to the all-powerful Shiva, the great king of the atheist family, namely Prahlad Maharaj, Swayambhuva Manu and his wife Shatarupa, his sons and daughters like Priyavrata, Uttanapad, Akuti, Devahuti, and Prasuti, Prachinabari, Ribu, Anga, the father of Vena, Maharaj Dhruva, Ikshvaku, Oila, Muchukunda, Maharaj Janaka, Gadhi, Raghu, Ambarish, Sagara, Gaya, Nahusha, Mandhata, Alarka, Shatadanve, Anu, Rantidev, Bhishma, Bali, Amutaraya, Dilipa, Sobari, Utanka, Shibi, Devala, Pipalada, Sarasvata, Udava, Parashara, Urishena, Vibhishana, Hanuman, Shukadev Goswami, Arjuna, Arshtisena, Vidura, Shrutadev, etc. Purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. All the great devotees of the Lord, as mentioned above, who flourished in the past or present, and all the devotees of the Lord who will come in the future are aware of the different potencies of the Lord, along with the potency of his name, quality, pastimes, entourage, personality, etc. And how do they know? Certainly it is not by mental speculation, nor by any attempt by dint of limited instruments of knowledge. By the limited instruments of knowledge, either the senses or the material instruments like microscopes and telescopes, one cannot even fully know the Lord's material potencies, which are manifested before our eyes. For example, there are many millions and billions of planets far, far beyond the scientist's calculation. But these are only the manifestations of the Lord's material energy. What can the scientist hope to know of the spiritual potency of the Lord by such material efforts? Mental speculations, by adding some dozens of ifs and maybes, cannot aid the advancement of knowledge. On the contrary, such mental speculations will only end in despair by dismissing the case abruptly and declaring the non-existence of God. The sane person, therefore, ceases to speculate on subjects beyond the jurisdiction of his tiny brain. And as a matter of course, he tries to learn to surrender unto the Supreme Lord, who alone can lead one to the platform of real knowledge. In the Upanishads, it is clearly said that the Supreme Personality of Godhead can never be known simply by working very hard and taxing the good brain, nor can he be known simply by mental speculation and jugglery of words. The Lord is knowable only by one who is a surrendered soul. Herein, Brahmaji, the greatest of all material living beings, acknowledges this truth. Therefore, the fruitless spoiling of energy by pursuing the path of experimental knowledge must be given up. One should gain knowledge by surrendering unto the Lord and by acknowledging the authority of the persons mentioned herein. The Lord is unlimited, and by the grace of the Yoga Maya, helps the surrendered soul to know him proportionately with the advance of one's surrender. Om Gyanatimirandasya Gananjana Shalakaya Chakshun Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Svayam Upakadamayam Terati Svapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yuta Padakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavam Cha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Saganaragnatam Vidam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Saitan Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sagana Lalita Shri Vishakanvitam Cha Hey Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandhu Jagatpate Gopisha Gopika Kanta Radhakanta Namostute Tapta Kansana Garange Radhe Vrindavaneshware Vishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Vanchakalpatayubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhyeva Cha Patitanan Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shri Vasari Gaurabhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Namo Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prestaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swami Niti Namine Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Desha Tarine. Hare Krishna. We're studying Srimad Bhagavatam Canto 2 Chapter 7 Text 43 to 45. It's October 23rd, 2020. I'm here with Ramachandra Parampara Bhakti Keith, and online we have Kim and Gajendra and Kara, Anandini, Lakshmi Priya, Damayanti, Bhakta Eze, Narayan, and Malini. Hare Krishna. And so Lord Brahma is continuing to talk to his disciple and son Narada Muni, and there's quite a list of many great personalities here from throughout the Bhagavatam, throughout different periods of history. We got Hanuman and Vibhishan from Ramachandra's pastimes, and Muchukunda. He's the one who was found in the cave in Krishna's pastimes, and he exists for many millennia. And of course, when he was found, he burned to ashes Kali Yavana. That's in Krishna book. And there's the daughters of Swayambhuva Manu and Shatarupa, the wife of Swayambhuva Manu, and the father of Sita, and so Prahlad Maharaj and his grandson Bali Maharaj. So Brahma is saying that we know, we have knowledge. So sure, the infinite potencies of the Supreme, of God, of Krishna, I mean, that's unknowable. In the first verse of the 7th chapter of Bhagavad Gita, Krishna says, Maya Saktamana Parta Yogam Yunjan Manashriya Samshayam Samagramam Yatagyasya Tatrinu. He says, now hear, Arjuna, how by practicing yoga in full consciousness of me, with mind attached to me, you can know me in full. Okay, so we can know. In fact, we're built of knowledge, chit potency. It's because in the and I'm emphasizing this point because in the verses before, there's verses like Brahma saying, like, yes, like even if there were scientists who could count the atoms in the universe or all of creation, still they can't even know a fraction of the qualities, of the glories of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And Brahma saying, yeah, I myself, like, yeah, I manage the universe and like, but I don't know anything about Krishna, you know, so like there's verses like that. And then, you know, and then there can be a misunderstanding, yeah, we're so tiny, because there's truth to that. We're so tiny and like that. There could be a misunderstanding, yeah, and like, we can't know anything. We can't know anything. And so it's important to understand that actually the substratum of our very existence is knowledge. Now, when we say knowledge, what's referred to knowledge here? Like we sang Shikuru Charana Padma, Divyagan Ride Prokashito, Chakudana Diloye, Janme Janme Prabhu say Divyagan Ride Prokashito. He opens my eyes with transcendental, he fills our hearts with transcendental knowledge. He is my Lord, birth after birth. Okay. So the spirit soul is made of such Chidananda. It's made of chit potency. So we are knowledge. So this idea of that we can't know anything, sort of, and actually the postmodern era is characterized by an incredulity to the possibility of foundations of knowledge. And so it can lead, this can lead to I'll call it a sort of anti-intellectualism. No, if you want to be spiritual, don't even try to understand anything. That's not spiritual, right? Don't even try to understand with your intellect. Just feel your feelings and experiences like that. And it can lead to a sort of anti-intellectualism and kind of like a philosophy that's anti-philosophy, like that. And okay, to make a distinction, so we have like, say, Srila Prabhupada on the Jaladuta, and like in his poems, in his poems, he's in one place, right towards the end, there's two poems there, and I forget which is which contains which parts, but you know, there's one place where he's praying to Krishna and he said, yeah, I have no knowledge and I have no devotion. And so, okay, so here I am coming to Boston Harbor. I have no knowledge, no devotion. If you want, you know, you can make me dance. You can use me as a puppet, and you in a sense, he's saying you can make my name true. Bhakti-vedanta. Bhakti-vedanta means knowledge and devotion. So he's saying, I have no knowledge and no devotion. And if you want, you can make my name true. And that's up to you. Okay. Not like I'm up to you, so I'm not going to do anything. It's I'm up to you. I'm 100% Sreda Nimit Matram Bhava Savisachi to be your instrument for bhakti. He said, I have no knowledge, I have no devotion. I do have full faith in the mission of Bhakti Siddhanta and full faith in your name, Sri Krishna. Okay, so that's different. Okay, that's the humility of the pure devotee who's filled with transcendental knowledge and really feels like he has no transcendental knowledge. And as we've discussed many times, that that sort of spiritual low self-worth, that sort of true spiritual humility, it moves one, it moves the soul to full dedication to serve the mission of the spiritual master. So that's spiritual. That's different than the philosophical understanding That's different than the philosophical misunderstanding that we can't know anything, that there are no foundations for knowledge. That's an important distinction. And so Prabhupada's and Lord Brahma, he says, yeah, so the potencies of the Lord are unknowable and immeasurable. Yeah, we've emphasized that. And because we're surrendered souls, we do have realization. We do have realization. We do have realized knowledge. And this Divya Gan, so we can maybe differentiate knowledge from information or data. So in that definition, this is realized knowledge, realization of who we are, spirit, soul, realization of what is material energy, realization of super soul connection. So knowledge here, it's not like who won the Super Bowl in 1974, or how many windows are in the Empire State Building, or something like that. Okay. So this is just like Krishna in the 13th chapter of Bhagavad Gita, he describes 19 elements of the process of knowledge, starting with realized humility, realization of how terrible it is to be to be attached to a body that's subject to birth, death, old age, disease. This is the knowledge that's being talked about, not knowledge that moves us to liberation, moves us to self-realization and liberation. And so Brahma makes the point of, yeah, and we were filled with that knowledge through surrender. And Prabhupada makes that point that, yeah, to know an object, to know an object, we need a proper means for studying that object. And so Bhakti Mama Abhijanati Yavanyash Jasmi Tattvata Tattva Mam Tattvato Gyatva Vishate Tadanatra. Krishna says, to know me, the process is bhakti. The process, because just like we are self-revealing, we reveal ourselves when we choose to. So we're parts and parcels of Krishna. And so that propensity starts with our source. So the Bhagavatam is self-revealing. Krishna is self-revealing. Vedeshu Durlabha Bhakta. Not to those who are only interested in scholarship, just like collecting knowledge, but to one who's devoted. Similarly, like we self-reveal to those who we decide, yeah, I trust you. Yeah, I get you really care about me. I'm inspired to share more about myself. So that propensity comes from Krishna. He's self-revealing to those who are devoted. So Brahma, in one sense, in these previous verses, he's saying, you can't, we're so tiny, even me, Brahma, I'm so tiny, can't know. But he's saying, but we do know, not through the empirical process, not through the speculative process, through surrender, through devotion. And so Krishna says, Yaya tamam prapadite bas tam sateva bhajamyaham mama vartmanu vartante manusha parta sarvasha. So the translation of the verse, essentially Prabhupada gives that in the last lines of his purport. He writes, the Lord is unlimited, and by the grace of the Yoga Maya helps the surrendered soul to know him proportionately with the advance of one's surrender. So like if what we want is, what I want is realization of how to tear into a body and rip its flesh and taste its flesh and blood, okay, Krishna will reciprocate. So that's what it's a well-known verse in the 4th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita. Krishna will reciprocate. Okay, you get a body of a tiger. If we want realization of of how I'm not the body, and we're not wanting surrender to the Supreme Person, all right, we'll get some Brahman realization. If we want super soul realization, we can get. So Krishna reciprocates to the yogi, the materialist, the karmi. Sometimes karmi is used in a derogative term. Importantly, actually, to become a karmi in the Vedic sense is quite an elevated thing. It's quite an elevated thing. Karma means we're actually following our karma according to the Vedas. Okay, it's not full transcendence, because there's karma and then there's vikarma, which means my activities are not only are they not transcendental, but it's a complete misuse of the human body. It's a complete misuse of the human form. They're vicious karma, and they're just doing harm. Right? I'm not following sattva principles. I'm not following varna. I'm not following ashram. It's just a misuse of the human form. And just like, okay, the whole world is Durga, prison house. We heard that yesterday from Anandini. The whole world is Durga. And but then within the prison house, there can be, like, the human form is relatively minimum security. Right? Relatively minimum security. Most of you have heard me say, back in the early 90s, I went with Chandrasekhar. He was the director of the ISKCON prison ministry, to a prison at Eglin Air Force Base, kind of between Tallahassee and Pensacola. And we were driving up, I saw there were people playing tennis and volleyball. I assumed it was the Army generals or the prison administrators. But later I found, when we got into the prison to do a Bhakti-yoga program, it was the prisoners. It was a minimum security prison, white collar crime, that sort of thing. I remember those who we did, there were about 20 prisoners in the program, and they were proud. They said, yes. Next week there's a state senator is going to come into our prison because he embezzled some money, and then one of those of the program, he was a bank manager. So yeah, but so they really had quite a lot of freedom. And there wasn't even there was no barbed wire, but there was a painted white line, and physically they could just walk past the line. If they walked past the line, then they would go to a maximum security prison. So it's still prison. So vikarma is we completely misuse our human form of life. Karma is we follow our psychophysical nature according to some guidance, and we gradually elevate towards sattva. And then akarma is that our activities, our thoughts are completely transcendental to the laws of karma. And yeah, so again, we are made of knowledge. We are made of chit potency, cognizance, samvit potency. So is Krishna. So the substratum of everything is cognizance, knowledge. And we often, sometimes we make these distinctions. I describe that I've been involved in human potential movement, personal growth since the late 1970s. And I've been to many seminars and things like that. And there are two main approaches philosophically. Not that those involved or even those facilitating think about the philosophy necessarily, but one approach is what we call the blank slate approach. The blank slate approach. And which is the idea is that at the core, we're nothing. And on the basis of that nothing, we can invent any possibility we choose. You can go to many human potential, personal growth, and that's what you'll get. And we can invent any possibility we choose because there's no substance. So of course that's not Bhagavad Gita. That's not Sattva Tov. We come, which we coined it the diamond approach. At the core, we're not nothing. At the core, metaphorically, we're a diamond. And just like a diamond is always strong and radiant and effulgent and brilliant and beautiful, so is the spirit soul. And a diamond can get covered. by dust, dirt, thick mud. So we've in conditioned material life, we've allowed the diamond soul to get covered by modes of nature. And so the process of our knowledge and our bliss, our effulgence radiating, it's a process of cleansing, process of uncovering. And even if, that's why the science of the three gunas, science of the three modes of nature, the idea is that to the extent that we're acting, thinking, relating, trying to communicate, influenced by rajas or tamas, we're going to be doing more harm than good. And that will be apparent either immediately or tomorrow or next year. We're doing more harm than good. That's why it's very important to know this science of the gunas. And even if our activities are not transcendental, but if we're acting in sattva, we are liberating that natural bliss and knowledge. We're in the process of cleansing. We're doing some good for ourselves and others. And this is vital, this knowledge, because ignorance, if our knowledge, to the extent that our real knowledge, realization is covered, then we're living in fear, we're living in envy, we're living in confusion, we're living in despair, we're living in desperation. We're living in desperation. And just like the example is given, just like if it's at night, it's very scary. There's thieves, there's who knows what might attack me. But then, okay, even if the sun's not high in the sky, but the sun, there's a few, even not quite sunrise, but just a few rays of the sun start shining, immediately we're relieved. Okay, I can see things, and the fear is dissipated. So that relates that we just begin to chant Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. And even if our chanting's not pure, my chanting's not with love of Krishna, my chanting's distracted, okay, but some chanting, and then we directly experience we experience liberation from material fear. We experience some glimpse of transcendence to mundane, petty material anxieties and envies and enviousness and jealousy. And so, so earlier, a few minutes ago, I mentioned that this idea of this misconception that we can't know anything, right? Okay, that characterizes postmodern attempts to epistemology, to knowing. At the same time, in Bhakti-yoga, we so much honor subjectivity. It's that we are subjective persons. And the Supreme is a person. So we were just talking last night in our Bhagavad Gita chapter 1 discussion. It's so much about Arjuna's subjectivity, Arjuna's experiencing. Arjuna's experiencing despair, lack of purpose, confusion, fear, insecurity, guilt. And that experience is very valuable. That experience moves. It's actually the yoga of despair. It's the yoga of dejection, because it moves him towards self-realization. So we often emphasize the foundational principles for enlightenment, for conscious living, are to experience our experience and be able to communicate it effectively so others get us. So we don't minimize or invalidate subjectivity. Right? So we're subjective persons. Natvevaham jatunasam natvam name janadipa nachevina bhavishima sarvevayam atatparam. We're eternally persons with valuable subjective experience. So we honor that in the context of living purposefully So that it's not that the all in all of purposeful living is to experience my feelings and say what I'm feeling. To be able to do that is fundamental for conscious living. In the context of giving ourselves in a rigorous way to a science of self-realization. We get like in modernism, the idea of the foundation of knowledge is this science, right? Logical positivism. And of course that has, that we can get some knowledge with that through material science. And so this Bhakti-yoga, yeah, we honor that way of knowing. This is a spiritual science, prajakshavagamam dharmyam shushukam kartumabhyam, and that through experiencing our experience, practicing a spiritual science through which we get direct realization of the self, joyfully performed. So a science, yes, we accept scientific process for self-realization. Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita, amongst all sciences, I am the science of the self, which means of the greatest of all sciences is science of self-realization. Science means, because, okay, then let's call it in the pre-modern era, the idea of knowledge is like, well, whatever the Pope says, or whatever this imam says, or like that. And so and in a sense that, in principle, that's what we're hearing here, because Brahma is listing these dozens of personalities, and these are authorities, but they're not fallible authorities, because they're fully taking shelter in the internal energy of God. Mahatmanas tumam partat devim prakritim ashrita. And so if like what's coming down from so-called spiritual authority, if it's just like, it doesn't satisfy the intellect, it's tainted and tinted or grossly affected by political agendas, then naturally sincere, intelligent people like, yeah, well, I've lost trust in that. And so we accept from infallible authority. We discussed so many times. That's why Srila Prabhupada's Bhagavad Gita, as it is, has such potency. Has such potency, because he's giving it as it is, full electric potency. Just giving. He's a devotee of Bhagavad Gita, and so the Bhagavad Gita is self-revealing. Srimad Bhagavatam is self-revealing. Sri Krishna is self-revealing. Arjuna is self-revealing. So Prabhupada's their devotee. And so we get the full potency. So we accept all these ways of knowing, from higher authorities through a scientific process, noting our subjective experience. Noting our subjective experience in the context of, to what extent does my subjective experience confirm, supplement, support, strengthen, reinforce the infallible knowledge coming from Shabda Brahman, coming from our parampara, from Guru Shastra Sadhu, like that. And okay, I'll pause there, and I thank you all for your presence and attention. Thank you, and I welcome if anyone has any questions or comments or realizations at this time. Parampara.
So, speaking about postmodernism, it's kind of like an agnostic thing, like we can't really know. Maybe there's something, but we can't. Maybe there's a truth, but we can't really know.
Yeah.
Kind of not like a. But and I think of that more. I see that most prevalent in like the kind of liberal arts or whatever. Like there's more
Liberal arts, yeah.
sociology or
Yeah.
cultural relativism,
Yeah,
and it influences a lot with liberal thought.
Yes, true.
Modern liberalism, and then so. But then, like the so-called hard sciences are still kind of acting from that modernism.
Yes.
Like we can find truth.
Yeah.
We can find through studies.
Yeah.
We can find the hard truth. And then there's, but then the kind of postmodernism, that's like the latch on to like the quantum physics, where it's like quantum physics that shows that like there's objective reality can be affected by the
consciousness
of the observer. So it seems, but the hard sciences maybe not like it's kind of convenient. They don't really. It seems like there's a contradiction there. But if everybody put it together, I think they could see that there's truth. The postmodernism has truth that, given the methods that we have,
yes,
the methods that we're using of modernistic science, we aren't going to be able to find a truth.
Yeah.
So it's like there is truth to that, to the postmodernism of like the foundations of knowledge.
Yeah.
You're not able to find those
Yeah.
with the modern scientific method, completely. So you need more. So it's that's what I was just thinking about, is that there's some realization, there is some truth there to the postmodernism, and if it could be married, if it could be see okay, there is objective, is relative, truth is relative in one sense with the methods that we're using, and like you said, a different epistemology.
Yes.
Like we needed a different. They were humble enough to see we need a different epistemology. Then there could be some hope there.
Thanks for sharing. I'm stimulated by your sharing in many respects. So related to Parampara sharing, if we see, this is painting with a broad brush, but there's three major movements on the planet. Three major movements. Okay, so one, let's call it fundamentalism, whether Christian or Islamic. And you might say that represents the pre-modern, okay? Fundamentalism. And another major movement is, let's call it secular humanism. And the idea there's science, right? Better living through chemistry. Yeah. And so that represents modernism. Okay. And then the other would be like, let's call it the green movement and that sort of thing, coming out of the hippies and the new age and that sort of thing. And that will tend to represent, again, I'm creating with the postmodernism, the solipsism, absolute relativism, that sort of thing. Because, even starting a while ago, there became some discouragement, some disenchantment with the modernism and the positive, because the idea is through modernism, better living through chemistry, that sort of thing. And then thinkers started saying, okay, well, what has this really given us? Okay, so through modernist movements, we got nuclear bombs, we got polluted water. Very practically, the whole industry, things like that. We got gas chambers. Right? These are very modernist movements, things like that. Yeah. So our opportunity is to illustrate through scholarship, through presenting Prabhupada in intelligent ways, through books, through lectures, to illustrate how, so this process of Bhakti-yoga, it includes, transcends, synthesizes, and synergizes all of these three movements, which all have their validity. And in themselves, they're all incomplete. they're all incomplete, like blind faith in a fallible authority with different agendas, or just trusting a sort of hollow inferential empiricism with no values, no morals behind it, or in terms of the postmodern case, so that you've heard me quote the orator, the valedictorian at Harvard University in the 80s. Ladies and gentlemen, there is one experience that we've all had at this fine institution of higher education, and that experience, ladies and gentlemen, is confusion. And he went on to say, the freedom of our day is the freedom to devote ourselves to any values we choose, on the mere condition that we don't believe that they're true. Thank you, Kara. Hare Krishna. So that points to the shortcomings of the incredulity towards the possibility of foundations for knowledge, and really it leads to insanity, leads to nihilism like that. So we get to show how Srimad Bhagavatam includes all that's valid and truly good about all these approaches, and transcends it and synergizes. Thank you. Thank you, Parampara. Narayan.
Could you speak a little bit more about like the foundations of authority from the Vedic perspective? You were talking about, you mentioned towards the end, maybe trusting in Muhammad or some imam or the Pope or a guru might be, fallible, but it seems like most of the time there's a large amount of people that will agree that somebody is like directly aligned with God's will, pure in some way, be it the Pope or a guru or whoever. So can you speak a little bit more about like how we know who to trust?
Okay, thank you. Thanks for that. Okay, so from the Vedic perspective, well, okay, really, so the Vedas established Bhagavatam as the Sarva Vedi Tihasanam Saram Sam Samudridam, as the topmost amongst pure literatures. And the Vedas, culminating in Bhagavatam, establish Sri Krishna as Supreme Personality of Godhead. And so, okay, so whether we're talking about the Vedas, Bhagavatam, Krishna, so that these are self-revealing, infallible sources of knowledge, infallible sources of realization. And then it's important to receive them through an unbroken chain of disciplic succession. Through an unbroken chain of disciplic. Actually, in recent days, Malini and I have had some correspondence, even talking about like Shankaracharya, even like the Shankaracharya, who's sometimes cited by Prabhupada as like a bona fide impersonal disciplic succession. And then even what to speak of what's going on in the name of Vedic Advaitavad. You can Vedanta today. But even shortly after Shankaracharya, of course, we understand he's an incarnation of Lord Shiva, and out of respect to Vyasadeva, and out of respect to Sri Krishna, the prime hero of Srimad Bhagavatam, Shankaracharya didn't touch Bhagavatam. He commented on other Vedas and Vedanta Sutra. He didn't touch Bhagavatam. He did compose beautiful beautiful bhajans, beautiful songs glorifying Govinda, Krishna, and Krishna's pastime. Okay, and as we know, he like on his deathbed, he was saying, Bhaja Govinda, Bhaja Govinda, Bhaja Govinda, Muda Mate. Oh, my foolish disciples, just worship Govinda, worship Govinda, worship Govinda. Anyhow, he deliberately didn't comment on Bhagavatam. So then some of his followers, or so-called followers, a few generations later, they thought, well, he honored Govinda, he glorified Govinda, who's described mainly in the Bhagavatam. That means he would want us to comment on Bhagavatam, and they would start giving impersonal interpretations of the Bhagavatam. That, yeah, there's all these pastimes, but this is ultimately all Maya in Sattva-gun, and the real conclusion of Bhagavatam is the impersonal oneness. So I'm just giving it as an example where they kind of broke the disciplic succession. They're not even giving impersonalism according to their disciplic succession. So if one accepts the Vedas as an infallible source of knowledge, okay, then the Vedas give disciplic succession coming from Shiva, from Lakshmi, from the Kumaras, from Brahma. And so we want to be, it's vital that we're receiving the Vedas, from an authorized disciplic succession. It's not just, well, you say this, you say that, and then Palina Parichiyate. We gave the example of Srila Prabhupada. And again, as far as, well, what about this one? Well, on the internet, I read about this. Okay, yeah, I don't know, but the principle is we need to receive this Divya-gan through a bona fide disciplic succession. 100% for sure, we can judge by the results. Prabhupada is not just a bona fide acharya, he's a bona fide Shaktivesh avatar. He's a bona fide Shaktivesh avatar. And his vibration, his words, his pastimes transform hearts, because he is perfectly surrendered to Srila Bhakti-siddhanta, who's perfectly surrendered to Srila Gaura Das Babaji, who is fully surrendered to Srila Bhakti Vinod Thakur. And of course, actually, on the first page of Chaitanya Charitamrita, Prabhupada writes, Bhakti Vinod Thakur initiated Gaura Das Babaji. Gaura Das Babaji initiated Jagannath Das Babaji initiated Bhakti Vinod Thakur, even though no formal initiation took place. But initiation means they completely 100% surrendered to the mission of their spiritual predecessor. And so Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu appeared in this disciplic succession. So basically authorized discipline, and it's not for me to comment. Like I don't mean to criticize the popes, right? There's many wonderful Catholic people and they have full faith in the Pope. It's not for me to criticize, like that. And
That's not the infallibility also.
Even in principle.
Yeah.
Right. So I don't quite understand how they, but it seems that, yeah, so if we look at the 500 popes, 200, whatever it is, yeah, there's some interesting behavior among some of them, So, so we need to receive this transcendental means. It's transcendental to the faults of material senses and mind. So that's the Vedas, that's Bhagavatam, that's Bhagavad Gita, that's Krishna. And we need to get it. We need to get it through a current link to the Parampara, who's representing an unbroken chain of those who are fully surrendered, infallible servants of Sri Krishna's mission, or at least of the mission of the Vedas. Let's put it that way. Okay, so that's the principle. Application of the principle, taking full shelter of Srila Prabhupada, is one sure and doubtless way to apply the principle. Yeah, but there are others too. Okay, maybe we can assess that, But Prabhupada's a sure, secure, doubtless way to be sure that we're getting the full transcendental vibration without any compromise or without any inebriation, without any tinge, subtle or gross, of the modes of material nature. Did I respond to parts of your question?
Yes, yes, thank you. I appreciate
Thank you, Nuri. Anything else? Malini.
You want to say?
it was actually me asking kind of
Right, yes.
So, I've heard you say that a few times about, we can see by the fruits basically of the transformation that Srila Prabhupada created in his mission. And, I don't want to discount that. And if I'm 100% honest, like I have this doubt in like, how do we quantify like someone's impact? And also like, from my perspective, I've seen so much, stuff in the movement. So I just, like how do you quantify like transformation?
Yeah, I appreciate I appreciate your sharing, and for me it's not a doubt. In fact, I'm in agreement with you that it's not essentially about quantity. It's not essentially about quantity. Right, like there are so many bogus gurus who might have more followers than Srila Prabhupada. Coca-Cola is tremendously successful. So does that mean Coca-Cola is a good thing? I mean, it's not about quantity. And so for me, the answer is very personal. For me, the answer is personal.
Excuse me, can you mute at Bhakti-yoga retreat because there's an echo thing.
Yeah, that I whatever extent I've given, in a sense, my answer is subjective. I mean, but some might see that, oh yeah, well, yeah, Srila Prabhupada's Bhagavad Gita has brought so much inner peace to so many people, but for me, it's mostly subjective, personal. And that to the extent that I've given myself over the past 40 years or so to follow Prabhupada, serve him, serve his mission, to whatever extent I've done that, then the results are phenomenally successful in terms of my experience of self, my experience of life, my experience of freeing and liberating myself from all sorts of just stupidity and nonsense, and experiencing, let's call it, all the contract qualities of the soul. So I'm eager to share this process given by Srila Prabhupada. And someone might, and so like that's why I encourage people, open the jar of honey, hear from Srila Prabhupada, follow him to whatever extent you're willing to stretch yourself, and see your experience. And that requires making, it requires being independently thoughtful and making a distinction, right? Just like so many practitioners will agree, like there's a difference between actually following Jesus and just like, well, I went to the Presbyterian church and I didn't have the, like that. So I'm not criticizing any Presbyterian church, but the idea is we need to make a distinction between what's coming from any particular institution and what's actually coming from Jesus or Prabhupada. And I would say if one's not capable or willing to make that distinction because there's too much attachment, then And then there can be an element of throwing the baby out with the bathwater. No, there was so much corruption and deception, and like no, and not, I don't want Prabhupada, like that. And then and I'm not opposing institution if the institution actually supports us to understand Prabhupada. So for me, it's been vital. So it's my answer to you is really based on my personal experience. To the extent that I've followed Prabhupada, served Prabhupada, and dedicated myself to his mission, the results of the experiment are fantastically successful. My regrets in life and my anxieties and my shame is where I've not followed Prabhupada. And I'm not saying that, in some sort of rote mechanical way. That's my experience looking back over the 40 years since I was first introduced to Prabhupada's books and Prabhupada's followers and like that. That's my experience. And if someone has a different experience, I'm certainly ready to hear and to consider personally. And oftentimes, and I don't want to paint with too broad a brush, oftentimes when someone says they have a different experience, my perception or my interpretation is they're confusing what Prabhupada's actually giving with some institutional deviation, dogma, distortion like that, just as someone might confuse what Jesus actually taught and the example he gave with a particular institutional misrepresentation.
Thank you. Malini has a comment.
Yeah, I appreciate the conversation and appreciate your response, dear Govinda, about the disciplic succession. And then, like, this is not complete for me because, yeah, there is a disciplic succession, and then people say, well, yeah, I'm coming after, Srila Prabhupada. And so the disciplic succession in itself, the part is not complete. And then you went into like the subjective experience of Srila Prabhupada is a solid place. And then you expanded on that. And also it seems that it's kind of, I don't find the words right now, but to think that we are capable of seeing with an authority in spiritual life is presumptuous.
Yeah.
Because it doesn't seem we have any qualification to even being able to see with an authority. So I will not say I choose Prabhupada, I will say Prabhupada chose me, came to me. Because on my own, if I was to like, okay, I'm going to find an authority in spiritual life, then the chance that I'm going to land at Srila Prabhupada Lotus is probably very, very, very small.
Mm-hmm.
So, like in response to, not in response, but in expanding on Narayan's question is like, yeah, what qualification we have to even determine or decide who is in a spiritual authority when we are so conditioned and covered over and our senses are so limited, our mind is covered by sense gratification and all that. It seems like hopeless and helpless.
Thanks for that, Malini. Yeah, I looked at. Yeah, I can't say that I was so sincere to look for spiritual authority. No, I didn't have sincerity. So I appreciate that perspective. I didn't find Prabhupada. Prabhupada found me. He was, he found me, and like that. Thanks for that, Molly.
Well, I could say, I think the question about who are we to try to determine who's a bona fide authority? That's a good question. And what I was going to share is that it seems that the Vedic process is not in appointing an authority for everyone, that's not the process. No institution or authority appointed Srila Prabhupada to be the guru. It was self-evident.
Self-evident, self-revealed.
Self-revealing, self-evident, and then, all the gurus, Gaura Kishore Das Babaji, no one appointed him that he's going to be was it him or Jagannath? No, he didn't want any disciples. Which one?
Jagannath Das Babaji is the guru of Bhakti Vinod, who's the guru of Gaura Kishore Das Babaji, who's the guru of Bhakti Siddhanta.
Which one didn't even want disciples?
Gaura Kishore.
Kishore, yes. He didn't even want disciples, so nobody appointed him that he's
right.
He's gonna be the Charya.
Yeah.
It's all self-evident, and obviously we see is a failure to try to appoint elected, gurus, things like that. So that's not the Vedic process to have an authority for everyone, or it's about, like I said, opening the jar and tasting the honey. It's a personal relationship. It's personalism. So there's personal choice. There's personal. There is subjectivity.
There's subjectivity, definitely.
So have an objective, absolute authority established for others to follow. That's not the Vedic process. The Vedic process is for that relationship and teacher to be revealed through and there's steps in the Vedas, and there's in the Vedas there's guidelines on how to find a guru, or how do you know when you found a bona fide guru. But it comes up to the person and the choice and the reciprocation between desire and humility and sincerity, and and there's going to be reciprocation based on that, or there's just causeless mercy. Also, but doesn't answer the question that Mom is.
Nice. Thanks for that, Parampara. I appreciate that very much. Yes. And so, of course, it's a subjective experience. What's my taste of this honey inside the jar? And we might have different tastes. And I like how you gave the Vedic perspective. Prabhupada has many places where he specifically says in his purports that a guru is not, determined by committee or by votes, he says, and like that. And so, I become angry. I become disturbed. Not if someone says, well, my heart is with this one over here. I so much respect that, like that. And of course, if someone is saying my heart's with this one over here, and I sense they're being misled by someone who's really cheating them, okay, then I might have concern and determine is it my role to try to point something out, and usually it's not my role. This is between Krishna and you, like that. But I become distraught, when people are advocating strongly that the jar of honey called Srila Prabhupada is not available. Then that's really doing damage to Lord Chaitanya's movement. So that Prabhupada is one's currently. That's not available. That's not possible. So this is painful. This is painful. It's false. It's philosophically false, based on historical precedent, based on experience. It's false in all ways. And then maybe someone who's doing that is innocent. Maybe they're not so innocent, but they're doing damage. Thanks for sharing. Damayanti.
Thank you, Hare Krishna. So if someone were to say Srila Bhakti Siddhanta is no longer available as one's current link to the disciplic succession, would you not feel pain? Would you say, yeah, that's reasonable?
Well, if someone would say Srila Bhakti, I don't say that Srila Bhakti Siddhanta is not available. At the same time, he might be not available as one's currently. So I'd say, show me, if someone comes. So in a sense, I haven't seen it. but it doesn't mean it doesn't exist. I haven't seen where someone truly the one that they're most directly, personally receiving Divya Gyan from is Srila Bhakti Siddhanta. I haven't seen it. Now, but if someone comes, no, really, Bhakti Siddhanta, it's his books and it's following his instructions. That's my direct source of Divya Gyan. You know, who am I to argue? And I would not try to discount it. I haven't seen it. You know, I guess, yeah, maybe I'm thinking, you know, Bhakti Siddhanta is acting so wonderfully through Srila Prabhupada as the current link like that. But if someone were to come to me and say Bhakti Siddhanta by this definition, Divya Gyan, direct, personal, it's Bhakti Siddhanta for me. I haven't seen it, but if someone says that's my truth, okay, I'm not going to argue, and I'm certainly open to that. I haven't seen it.
So is there like a point at which we go further at the disciplic succession where you would take a stand, this person is not available? Like, let's say if there were no, go back to the disciple previous to Srila Prabhupada that maybe didn't write any books, so then how can they be receiving Divya Gyan from that person? Would you say, I'm sorry, but I feel like this is false, not possible, or something? Would you?
No, maybe it's for Prabhupada to take such a stand. It's not for me to take such a stand. If someone says, my direct connection is Krishna himself, okay, you can see by my nonverbals, I might be skeptical, you know, things like that. But, you know, who am I to say who am I to say what's in someone's heart and their relationship with Krishna, their relationship with Rupa Goswami, their relationship with Srimati Radharani? Who am I to say? Sure, based on their behavior, based on my experience, I might make some assessment, but it's not for me to take that stand. That's not my role. I might have some skepticism.
Did you ever experience Srila Prabhupada taking a stand about there's a certain point at which previous acharyas are no longer available? I mean, I haven't studied that topic.
Well, okay, from Srila Prabhupada's teachings that, yeah, basically, you know, we don't, yeah, by his teachings and example, you know, we don't, we don't see him referring anyone in a direct sense to Gorakishore Das Babaji or Bhaktivinoda Thakur. So like for Prabhupada, Bhakti Siddhanta is the current link. And Bhakti Siddhanta is the current link. I don't know that, there's a place where Prabhupada says, and no one can go to previous acharyas without going through Bhakti Siddhanta. I don't know if there's any statement like that through from Srila Prabhupada. And of course, it's a little more complex because Bhaktivinoda Thakur had other disciples, and so Prabhupada did not discount those sampradayas, those paramparas like that. So it's like for me to take a stand that Prabhupada's available, and it's not for me to take a stand that other great acharyas are not available to the current link. And it is for me to share. I haven't seen someone who's really directly connected in that way, like that.
Thank you. Yeah, because I'm thinking like, for anyone to take a stand that Srila Prabhupada is not available, which is the thing that you said before I asked all my questions, and that brings you pain and distress. For someone to say that, they really need to have some sort of authority to back that up.
Yeah.
And you have not only like authority from the current link Prabhupada, but also be able to show through experience that it's not possible.
And that would be very difficult because someone might say, no, my experience is that this guru is my current link to Prabhupada. And that's fine. But basically, they need to show through experience that the experience of Damayanti is wrong and invalid. They need to show through their experience that the experience of paramparadas and anandini is invalid. They need to show through experience that the experience of tens of thousands, probably hundreds of thousands or more people who experience Prabhupada as their direct link to the parampara. How are they going to show through their experience that the experience of thousands of sincere devotees like Gajendra Das Prabhu and Mother Malini is wrong? Ugh, that's quite a mountain to climb. Malini?
Yes.
Oh, Malini, then Gajendra.
I just wanted to share something, before Damayanti spoke. I wanted to share something because it's very fresh. It's happened to me yesterday. I was attracted to read a book about Srila Prabhupada, the biography about Srila Prabhupada. And so I went on Amazon, and fortunately, there was, I could preview the book. And so I started reading the preface. And I was disturbed by that preface because the content of that preface was basically saying that when all the disciple of Srila Prabhupada, and in that book, meaning the people who were with Srila Prabhupada and accepted initiation from Srila Prabhupada pre-77, after they all die, there won't be any disciple of Srila Prabhupada. And I was thinking, how is that possible? That Krishna will send his personal associate coming on earth to present the teaching of the Veda for like having 10 years of discipleship. And then after that, it's finished, it's over. And I was very disturbed by reading that assumption or the place where they were coming from in their explanation that Damayanti didn't exist, that Rohini didn't exist, that I didn't exist, that so many, Anasuya didn't exist, Lakshmi Priya didn't exist, and will never exist. And that was very disturbing. I said, how is that possible? That's all I wanted to share.
Thank you, Malini. Thanks for your sharing. Gajendra Prabhu? You're on mute. You're on mute.
Well, gosh, now you actually have to hear me. Sorry about that. So as I'm listening to this, and this is this discussion of Srila Prabhupada and availability or not availability, it's really interesting. There's been times in my life that I've looked at it really, really closely, and in fact, your writings, the prominent link, have been greatly, heavily influential to my thinking, and appreciatively to my sense of liberation and understanding that Srila Prabhupada is my Guru Maharaj. As I'm listening, there's a little bit of a, not but to that, but as I'm listening to the conversation, I feel like I'm hearing maybe descriptions of an institution or other people's way of thinking, which probably in some cases is highly accurate, but in a lot of cases, I'm not so sure that it is accurate. It's a little more complex. So, for example, devotees who may identify with ISKCON institutionally very much feel themselves a member of ISKCON. Well, there's thousands and thousands of devotees, and there's not necessarily a one monolithic opinion about all these things. There may be individual devotees who are antagonistic to anything other than maybe a certain party line. But when I look at the party, it's even things like GBC resolutions, or even like Jayadeva Swami's own comments about the books. It's not monolithic. And so there's at the local temple, I don't know what the current policy is. It's something I didn't agree with. But for example, there was some kind of rule or order supposedly coming down that only the new books could be used. If someone wanted to give a class from one of the original books, no. I didn't personally agree with that, but I found it very interesting in just elsewhere reading online, Jayadeva Swami, that wasn't his view. What he expressed is it's totally okay. I mean, he was sort of more open-minded, like he wasn't really pushing that just his book. And so it's like, I feel like there's so many devotees in ISKCON and other groups out of ISKCON, and they love Srila Prabhupada. A lot of them were very intimate disciples of Srila Prabhupada, even those who aren't aligned with ISKCON anymore. And they're very much about Srila Prabhupada. And it is a complexity because, like, well, ISKCON doesn't like what they're doing. They don't like what ISKCON's doing. But they're all revering Srila Prabhupada, which is an interesting point of itself. How revered Srila Prabhupada is, even by people who disagree. But I'm not actually. Coming back to this word of availability or unavailability, I don't have a strong sense in my own readings or awareness that people are saying Srila Prabhupada is not available. So I'm kind of questioning a little bit the use of this phrase or idea that other people are saying Srila Prabhupada is not available. In what I've read, things coming from the GBC, and I'm sorry, I can't be detailed with it, whether it's like an advisory council or a particular order. There is a difference in that they feel the initiation has to come through someone who's living. But even that said, the point is made that someone may still feel that Srila Prabhupada is their primary source, that's where their heart is. In the statement in the GBC paper, again, I don't remember what it was, just said, those kinds of things can't be legislated. There's no issue with someone surrendering to Srila Prabhupada or finding shelter in Srila Prabhupada. So it's just something that I just feel like, again, who's exactly saying that Srila Prabhupada is not available, even if there's some disagreements on certain points regarding formal initiations. Because I'm not aware, I mean, probably somebody's saying Srila Prabhupada is not available because there's a lot of people, but I've never personally heard that. And so I'm questioning.
Thanks for your sharing. Yeah, for sure, when we get into individual devotees who may associate themselves with different organizations, institutions, mats, yeah, there's practically infinite variation, practically infinite variation and in individual nuance understandings and not just understandings, but experiences. But like that. So yeah, on the individual basis and on institutional basis, on any institution, yeah, over a period of 5 years, 10 years, there will be changes in policy and philosophical approach, for sure. So yeah, so what we're well, you can, anyone can do a survey that it'd be like, okay, Srila Prabhupada is fully available to all members of his movement as to be the current and direct link to the parampara. The survey question would need to be carefully worded. Like you say, Srila Prabhupada is available to be the prime Siksha guru. I haven't yet, but so I'm saying I think it would be interesting results. Srila Prabhupada is fully available to serve as the current and direct link to the parampara for all members of his movement who sincerely serve him in that capacity. I think we find interesting results. Many examples, even let's say post-institutional reform. Institutional reform is defined as like 1987. So in 1990, I know there was at least one reformer, one main reformer, and in his temple, which was his temple, it was technically Prabhupada's temple, but like during Sri Guru Charana Padma, he would be standing in front of Srila Prabhupada. He would be standing in front of Srila Prabhupada, and then everyone in the temple would offer flowers. This is post 1987. Everyone in the temple would offer flowers to him because they couldn't get to Prabhupada except through him. That was his mercy. Okay, so maybe he didn't say Prabhupada's not available, but based on results, So these things need to be carefully worded to get at the nuance of consciousness, to get at what we're meaning by Srila Prabhupada's fully available as one's current and direct link to the parampara. And as far as, but to conduct the formal initiation, then a living, so it's not even, as you're well aware, even before November 14th, 1977, there are hundreds, maybe thousands of disciples of Prabhupada who received formal initiation from Srila Prabhupada, and Srila Prabhupada was not present at their initiation ceremony. Srila Prabhupada did not select their spiritual name. Srila Prabhupada did not chant on their beads. And there's no question, Srila Prabhupada is their current link to the parampara. So I'm saying that system that Prabhupada established through his example and teaching, that system is still available in Prabhupada's movement if someone chooses it. And I would say that if we word it that way, you will find many in the institution who will say, no, it's not available. Thank you. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai. Hare Krishna.